read a second time. I call the member for Granville.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. I rise to make a contribution to the debate on the Greyhound Racing Prohibition Bill. At the outset, I state that I am not a fan of the way the greyhound racing industry conducts itself, and I am incredibly concerned about animal welfare. But greyhounds like running and like running fast, and there is nothing inherently cruel in dogs racing each other. Yet the evidence before the McHugh inquiry and recent media reports are damning. Grotesque acts of animal cruelty are being perpetuated purely for commercial gain, and that cruelty must stop. But I believe the way the government has gone about banning greyhound racing without any sort of strategic direction or transition plan is wrong. After very careful and difficult consideration, I would prefer to give the industry one last chance to change the way it operates and work with them to ensure this happens, rather than implement a half-baked solution that I fear will result in most of the 10,000 or so greyhounds in New South Wales being put down rather than rehomed, as it's just not possible to retrain and rehome that many dogs in a year. It's also not fair to people who work in the industry not to provide any support or retraining to find employment after the shutdown. I also strongly support Labor's amendments to require that public lands used for greyhound racing cannot be sold or disposed of without an Act of Parliament, and to require a timetable and reporting on the assistance plan that we are all waiting to hear the details of. Constituents in my electorate have mixed views about the ban, and it isn't as big an issue in the Granville electorate as many others, such as the reforms to the taxi industry, which affects the livelihoods of hundreds of people in my electorate. But there are some people involved in the industry, many who have knowledge of the industry, and many others who are rightly concerned by the utter disregard for animal welfare shown by some in the industry. Labor supports implementing the recommendations of the McHugh inquiry. They are strong recommendations that I believe will go a long way to improving the industry. I'm not sure they go far enough, but only time will tell. What I am sure of is that the current industry structure and self-regulation does little to inhibit, deter or prevent animal cruelty should participants decide to engage in animal cruelty to increase their chances of their dog winning or to dispose of slow dogs. Labor wants to separate the commercial and regulatory governance of greyhound racing and improve the oversight of the industry for greater animal welfare. This is an important and overdue reform. The industry is coming off a very low base. Maybe it won't be enough, but it may be worth trying before considering banning greyhound racing altogether. We want stronger laws against animal cruelty in the industry, including lifetime bans for live baiting. And I believe more broadly there must be greater capacity for the enforcement of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act in New South Wales, which largely now rests with underfunded charity organisations. Whether or not greyhound racing is banned, this must happen if the government is serious about stopping cruelty to animals. In providing my support to those reforms, I call on the industry to take reform seriously. Every few years there's a scandal about greyhound racing, whether it be the continued use of live baiting, doping or the obscene numbers of perfectly healthy dogs being killed for being slow. And every time the industry promises to reform and then nothing happens. This time it must be different. Too many people have turned a blind eye to the worst excesses of the industry on the basis that they are not party to it. I say to the industry, the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. Stop turning a blind eye to live baiting. I know the overwhelming majority of you don't do it, but if you know of it happening, report it and stop it. It's been illegal for decades and for good reason. It is a cruel and abhorrent practice. It is entirely morally unacceptable. That it occurs at all and the participants have remained in the industry reflects on the entire industry. The same goes for doping and injuries sustained in racing. Stop turning a blind eye to these things. Many in the industry say they love their dogs. Well, if you love your dogs, please let them get old. Stop breeding so many dogs you can't afford to keep and can't find homes for if they are slow. I know some people in the industry keep failed or retired greyhounds as pets or have them rehomed, and I'm glad there has been a massive reduction in the number of pups bred in the last 12 months to reduce wastage and increase in rehoming. But it is not yet enough, nowhere near enough. Euphemistically calling it wastage or euthanasia doesn't change it. Killing healthy dogs is morally wrong and needs to stop. Greyhounds are no different to other dogs. They are lovable and deserve a happy, full life running around or living on the couch doing nothing. I say this as someone who has adopted a number of dogs that other people didn't want or couldn't keep. Great pets that I've never regretted taking on, even if I didn't have them for as many years as I would have liked. I also grew up on a farm, and my dad, like all our friends and relatives, always had some lovely old retired working dogs living around our house. Once they couldn't get up on the ute anymore, they retired to live out their days being spoiled at the farmhouse. Greyhounds deserve the same, not to be killed for not being profitable. What has happened with greyhound racing and the issues around animal cruelty is a perfect example of the failure of industry self-regulation. Time and time again, the industry has promised to reform and not done much, and time again, governments have taken them at their word. This is the largest difference between greyhound racing and horse racing. Horse racing is quite regulated. It is far from perfect, but it's also far from scandalous. The failure of industry self-regulation doesn't mean the only solution is to ban the industry if you haven't tried independent government regulation. It may be a more costly, difficult and complex solution than just banning things you don't like, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And effective regulation may not come with the added bonus of freeing up land for property developers who clearly the government really does like, but often it works and works well as a solution to a conflict between a commercial incentive to do the wrong thing and the public good, in this case the welfare of dogs and other animals. I'm sceptical about the government's approach in many ways, not least of which is because it's done so little to address puppy farms. Last year I sat on the committee to review companion animal breeding practices. We received hundreds of submissions about how to improve practices in New South Wales. The committee produced a report with unanimous recommendations agreed by representatives of the National Party, the Liberal Party, Labor, the Animal Justice Party and an independent. All of us wanted compulsory breeder registration and better resource policing of animal welfare. Breeder registration and a requirement that any ads for puppies display the breeder's registration details and requiring all registered breeders to comply with welfare standards for their facilities would drive the rogue operators out of New South Wales. It would make it impossible to hide behind dodgy ads on Gumtree and eBay. Yet the government balked at breeder registration, seemingly a simple process when the entire New South Wales companion animal registration process is being overhauled anyway. It seems the government is so fearful of regulation that it would prefer to either do nothing or ban things than govern and regulate. I'm also sceptical about the government's claims that it will retain all the public land currently used for greyhound racing, given it wouldn't accept amendments requiring this in the other place. We all know property developers have been eyeing off Wentworth Park for years, and I'm sure it's not the only dog track they're interested in. This is what happened with the lockout laws. With pretty much no consultation, many businesses were destroyed by having their hours of operation reduced, including venues that weren't associated with alcohol-fuelled violence. Bar staff and bouncers lost their jobs or had their shifts cut. And where many of those businesses closed, funnily enough, apartments are going up. No one believes that the government isn't going to flog off Wentworth Park or the other dog tracks. And if they won't put it in the legislation, why would we believe them? And why is nothing being done to stop betting on greyhound racing in New South Wales and other states? If the sport is so fundamentally abhorrent that it cannot be reformed, surely you would consider banning placing bets on interstate dog races. Online may be difficult, but a restriction at the TAB hasn't even been spoken of. I've spoken to dozens and dozens of people about the proposal to ban greyhound racing. They have a lot of questions which remain unanswered, especially about what will happen to the dogs. One suggestion put to me, which I think really merits consideration as an alternative to a ban, is to remove the commercial and wagering aspects of greyhound racing, but to still hold social race meetings, to allow hobby trainers to still race their dogs. People could still enjoy themselves, but without any incentive to overbreeding, live baiting, doping, or the other egregious and cruel aspects of greyhound racing. If you think those things can't be regulated and controlled. But of course, if you ban all breeding of greyhounds and you don't even let people breed them in small numbers as pets, this can't happen. They aren't a dangerous breed. They shouldn't be banned because some people do appalling things with or to them. I abhor animal cruelty. I spoke about my concern for animal welfare in my inaugural speech. It's something I've been passionate about since I was a child. I hold grave concerns about the grotesque findings of animal cruelty in the greyhound racing industry, and I certainly don't accept them. But at the same time, I can't see how the greyhounds in New South Wales will benefit in the short term from a hasty and poorly implemented ban on greyhound racing. It will just get most of them killed. The industry needs massive reforms. It needs to be properly regulated and has needed effective external oversight for many years. It will take genuine goodwill and a lot of strategic reform to turn the industry around, especially as there are people in the industry who openly support and practice live baiting, let alone breeding excessive numbers of puppies only to kill them if and when they fail to be fast enough. I would like to see a timetable for the reforms, to put the industry on notice that if they want their sport to continue, they must take change seriously. They must take animal welfare seriously, and they must take lifetime responsibility for their dogs seriously. Greyhounds are lovely animals that deserve to be treated with the same love and respect as other dogs. They deserve to get old. Suddenly having around 10,000 greyhounds in New South Wales requiring new homes won't achieve this.